He just wanted to learn. A quiet classroom, a professor at the board, and a simple math question that should have been routine. But when he spoke, everything shifted. The laughter didn't come from his classmates. It came from the very person who was supposed to guide him. In that instant, he wasn't just a student anymore. He was a target. What happened next froze the room and revealed a truth far bigger than one lesson. A truth about dignity, prejudice, and courage. This is the story the professor never wanted told. It was supposed to be just another day in class. Marcus, quiet, determined, the type of student who always sat in the front row, had his notebook open, pencil ready, eager to prove himself. Math had always been his safe space. Numbers were fair. No opinions, no bias, just answers. For Marcus, education wasn't just about grades. It was his way forward, his chance to prove he was more than stereotypes. His friends called him thoughtful, humble, the kind of young man who carried hope in his eyes. That morning, he walked into the lecture hall with his usual routine, backpack over his shoulder, formulas running through his mind, excitement building for the day's lesson. Nothing seemed unusual, not yet. But Marcus didn't know that before the hour was over. The very professor he admired would turn that ordinary day into a moment he would never forget, a moment that would test not just his knowledge, but his dignity. Marcus loved solving puzzles. Numbers made sense to him in a way the world often didn't. That morning, he woke up early, ironed his shirt, and prepared for his advanced math class, the one he'd worked toward since freshman year. For him, it wasn't just about equations. It was about proving he belonged, that he could stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone, no matter where they came from. But as he entered the lecture hall, the energy felt different. Students buzzed with chatter. Notebooks flipped open, laptop screens glowed. At the front stood Professor Ellison, brilliant, respected, but intimidating. Some whispered he enjoyed putting students on the spot, breaking them down just to see who could handle the pressure. Marcus found a seat in the middle row, clutching his notebook tight. He whispered to himself, "Stay focused. You belong here." The professor's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Today we're diving into proofs. Let's see who's been keeping up." His eyes swept across the room, sharp and calculating. Then they stopped. "Mr. Johnson," he said. His tone carried a challenge and something heavier. "Why don't you come to the board?" Marcus's heart skipped. He hadn't expected to be called so soon. Still, he gathered his things, stood, and walked to the front. Chairs squeaked. A few muffled chuckles followed him. The professor turned to the board, scrawling a complex problem in thick strokes of chalk. Dust floated in the air as he stepped back, arms crossed. "Solve it." Marcus inhaled deeply. He picked up the chalk and began. At first, his mind was steady. Each line connected, each number made sense. The problem unfolded like a puzzle he'd trained his whole life to solve. Then behind him a snicker, low, mocking. Another joined in. Marcus froze, chalk hovering midair. His eyes flicked to the professor, who smirked. "Go on, Mr. Johnson, don't lose your nerve." His palms grew damp. He forced himself to keep going. Step by step, he pressed forward, his voice barely above a whisper as he explained the logic. But the weight of dozens of eyes wasn't just on his work. It was on him. Halfway through, the professor's voice sliced in. "Wait, stop!" The word echoed. Marcus turned, heart pounding. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus steadied himself. "Yes, sir. That's the logical next step." The professor chuckled. Not warmly, not kindly. It was a laugh that cut deeper than words. "Interesting. I've been teaching this class for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone try something so wrong." Laughter erupted. Some students covered their mouths. Others didn't bother. The sound crashed over Marcus, each laugh a blade. His grip tightened on the chalk, hand trembling despite his effort to stay composed. But instead of backing down, Marcus squared his shoulders. He turned to the board, voice louder now, steadier. "With respect, Professor, the logic holds. If you just let me finish." The professor raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough, sit down before you embarrass yourself further." Silence fell. Marcus froze. His body screamed at him to obey, to sit down, to disappear, to escape the humiliation. But something inside him refused. He had worked too hard, come too far to let this moment break him. So he kept writing, each line sharper, each step stronger. His hand moved faster now, fueled not by fear but by defiance. The laughter behind him faltered. Whispers replaced it. The air itself shifted. The professor's smirk began to fade. His eyes narrowed. Because Marcus's proof, it was holding. The steps aligned. The conclusion was near. By the time Marcus pressed the chalk for the final mark, the room was silent. Not a laugh, not a whisper, only stillness thick enough to choke on. Marcus turned slowly, meeting the professor's eyes. For the first time there was no mockery in Ellison's face, only disbelief. Marcus's voice trembled, but it carried. "With respect, sir, that is the answer." The professor didn't speak. He just stared at the board, then back at Marcus. And in that silence, everyone realized what had just happened. But this wasn't just about a classroom. It was about something bigger. Because for Marcus, the fight for dignity didn't end when the chalk dropped. It followed him everywhere. The red and blue lights painted the street in violent colors. Marcus stood frozen, hands trembling in the air. "On your knees, now!" The officer barked. His mind screamed, "Why? What did I do?" But he didn't dare ask. Too many stories had already ended in silence. Boots hit the pavement. The officer's hand hovered near his weapon. The crowd formed, phones raised, voices shouting, but none of it mattered. Not when every twitch of Marcus's hand could decide whether he lived or died. He dropped to his knees. Gravel cut into his skin. His voice cracked. "I didn't do anything." "Quiet." The word slammed down like thunder. A boot struck his back. His face hit the pavement. Asphalt tore his cheek. A crushing weight pressed down on his ribs, stealing his breath. The crowd erupted. "He can't breathe!" Someone screamed. "Get off him!" Another cried. But the officer didn't move. His knee dug deeper. Marcus clawed at the ground. Nails cracked. His vision blurred. The world dimmed. This is how it ends. Another name. Another story. Another silence. And then a new voice cut through the chaos, commanding, fierce, unshakable. "Get off him now!" The officer froze. The crowd held its breath. In that split second between life and death, the world stopped. Would Marcus rise again? Or would this moment become another headline carved into tragedy? Back in that classroom, Marcus stood taller, his chest rising and falling under the weight of history. His professor's words still echoed, sharp, dismissive, poisoned by more than just arrogance. But Marcus no longer shrank beneath them. He lifted his chin. His voice cut through the silence. "Respect isn't handed out based on skin color. It's something every human being deserves. You may see me as less, but I will never accept less." The professor stayed silent, because for the first time, the power had shifted. And Marcus wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for every voice that had ever been mocked, silenced, or overlooked. The class ended that day in a silence no one could explain. But for Marcus, it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. He walked out of that room changed. Not because of the insult, but because he refused to let it define him. The pain was real, yes, but so was the strength. That's the thing about racism. It tries to strip away dignity, confidence, humanity. But when someone stands, when someone says no more, the power of that moment ripples far beyond the walls of a classroom. Marcus carried that day with him like both a scar and a shield. It fueled him in every paper he wrote, every interview he faced, every boardroom where he knew he might be the only one in the room. It reminded him of a hard truth. Silence helps the oppressor, but courage gives voice to the oppressed. And here's the truth, this isn't just his story. It's the story of thousands. Students working twice as hard for half the recognition. Workers passed over for promotions because of the color of their skin. Voices dismissed before they're even heard. Every time we brush it off, every time we stay silent, every time we let a joke slide because it's not that serious, we become part of the problem. Racism doesn't always wear fists or slurs. Sometimes it's a smirk, a dismissal, a door quietly closed in someone's face. That's why stories like this matter. Because when you feel it, when you put yourself in his seat, staring down a professor who doubts your worth, you realize how real, how painful, and how urgent this fight is. So let me ask you, if it had been you in that classroom, would you have spoken up? Would you have broken the silence? Or would you have looked away? The world doesn't change from one speech, one protest, or one video. It changes when millions of small moments, millions of people refusing to stay quiet, add up into something unstoppable. Marcus didn't just survive that day. he inspired others. Classmates later told him, "You made me think differently." Some admitted they had stayed silent but promised themselves they wouldn't next time. And maybe even the professor went home that night with a thought he couldn't quite shake. And you watching this right now are part of this story too, because what you do with it matters. Will this just be another video you scroll past? Or will it be the reminder that your voice, your choices, your courage carry weight? Racism doesn't disappear when we ignore it. It disappears when we confront it together. Marcus walked out of that classroom with his head held high, not because the world had changed, but because he had. And change always begins with one person refusing to stay silent. So I leave you with one question. How many more classrooms, how many more streets, how many more lives must be scarred before we finally decide enough is enough? If you've ever faced a moment that changed how you see someone you love, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful tales that touch the heart. Thank you for being here.